Every era has its own queen diva. Beyoncé was that diva in the 2000s, Madonna was that diva in the 1990s, and Barbara Mandrell was that diva in the 1970s and 1980s. Whether she was singing, dancing, or acting, Barbara owned the stage with the kind of energy that made every spotlight shine a little brighter. She even took over TV for 2 years with her hit variety show, and it wasn't just for fun she dominated. She won 2 Grammys, 4 CMS, 7 American Music Awards, and 9. She won 9 People's Choice Awards, 5 CMT Awards, and was the first artist to win Entertainer of the Year twice in a row. But in 1984, a terrible accident changed her life and ended her career. So what really made one of country music's biggest stars leave the spotlight, and what has Barbara been up to since? Stay tuned, because this video will reveal the truth about Barbara Mandrell's sudden departure from the spotlight and how she has been since. Barbara was born on Christmas Day 1948 in Houston, Texas, as a surprise to her parents, Mary Ellen and Herbie Mandrell. She is the oldest of 3 sisters. Barbara grew up surrounded by music. Her mom was a music teacher and her dad was a police officer, so the whole house was full of instruments and singing. The family later moved to Corpus Christi, where Barbara's natural talent began to shine. She had a knack for harmony and quickly picked up the guitar. Barbara learned to play the accordion before she even started first grade. When she was 6, her family moved to Oceanside, California, and her dad opened a music store. Barbara didn't miss a beat. She joined the school band and learned to play the saxophone. But it was the steel guitar that really changed things. After taking lessons from a family friend, Barbara was so good that her dad took her to a music trade show in Chicago, where she wowed country star Joe Maphis, who immediately put her on stage in Las Vegas. Quickly became a regular on the TV show Town Hall Party and toured with legends like Johnny Cash and Patty Keene. When she was 14, her parents formed the Mandrell family band with Barbara on steel guitar, her mom on piano, and her dad singing. They played everything from country hits to Beatles songs on military bases. Barbara wasn't just into music, though. She also won Miss Oceanside, California in 1965 and stayed involved in school activities after she graduated. In 1967, Barbara married the band's drummer, Ken Dudney, and decided to take a break from performing. But she was born to be on stage, so when Ken was sent to the Navy, Barbara went to see her parents in Nashville and realized she couldn't just watch, she had to be on stage. Her dad became her manager, and soon she was back performing in Printer's Alley in Nashville. Her talent wowed everyone, and Columbia Records signed her in 1969, and she was on her way to becoming a country star. Barbara's early career was different because she wasn't just a country singer, she also covered R&B and soul songs. Her first big hit, I've Been Loving You Too Long to Stop Now, was a cover of Otis Redding's song that put her on the country charts. The next year, Playing Around with Love, a song written by producer Billy Sherrill, made it to the top 20. She kept the momentum going by covering hits like Aretha Franklin's Do Right Woman, Do Right. In 1971, Mandrell released her first album, Treat 'Em Right, which included some of her charting singles as well as covers of songs by artists like Joe South and Ivory Joe Hunter. And that same year, she won the Academy of Country Music's Top New Female Vocalist Award and earned a coveted spot at the Grand Ole Opry. By 1972, her first solo top 10 hit was Tonight My Baby's Coming Home, and in 1972, she followed it up with Show Maine. During this time, she also worked with. They recorded several duets with country singer David Houston, and the songs were big hits. After Closing Time made it into the top 10, and they stayed on the charts together until 1974, even putting out a duet album called A Perfect Match. Critics liked how Mandrell mixed country and soul, saying that her sound had grit and her delivery gave her songs energy that stood out. But despite her talent, it seemed like Columbia Records didn't always know how to shape her style. Some of her work seemed to blur into what other artists on the label were doing, which kept her from really figuring out who she was. Her big break came in 1973 with Midnight Oil, a song about a woman caught in an affair. The single made it to the top 10 and pushed her album to the top of the charts as well. She kept up her country soul groove with I Almost Made It in 1974. Even with all of these successes, Mandrell sometimes had confidence issues, thinking she wasn't as good or polished as other artists. By 1975, she was ready for a new start and had left Columbia Records to look for new chances and take her career to the next level. That's when she signed with the BC and her career really took off. When Mandrell moved to MCA Records from RCA Records, she started adding pop elements to her music with the help of producer Tom Collins. This made her sound more accessible to a wider audience. Her first hit under the new label, Standing Room Only, made it into the top 5 on the country charts, setting the stage for more hits like That's What Friends Are For and Midnight Angel. Collins followed. Mandrell also added some R&B to her music, which turned out to be a good idea. Her covers of Denise Law's T Married But Not to Each Other and Shirley Brown's Woman Tomb In 1977, made waves on both the American and Canadian country charts, even making it into the Billboard Hot 100. This crossover success helped her sixth and seventh albums make a mark that year. By the late 1970s, Mandrell had found her voice. Niche with songs about love, heartbreak, and cheating that really spoke to her fans. In 1978, her first #1 was Sleeping Single in a Double Bed. The next year, her cover of Luther Ingram's If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right was another big hit, topping the country charts and also making it to the pop and adult contemporary charts. Both of these songs were from her popular album Moods, and just so you know, they both made it to the Billboard Top 10. Mandrell wasn't just a hitmaker, she knew how to put on a show. It was a big deal when she performed on multiple instruments and choreographed dances. One of these shows was even turned into a TV special called The Lady is a Champ, Her Star Was Shining, and in 1979 she won the Country Music Association's Female Vocalist of the Year award. Things got even bigger in the early 1980s when she co-hosted the NBC variety show Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters with her siblings, making her a household name and earning her. The Country Music Association gave her back-to-back Entertainer of the Year awards in 1980 and 1981. Her chart success continued with hits like Cracker's Best of Strangers and I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool. Her first live-hour album went gold in 1981, showing how long she could stay on top. Mandrell kept the momentum going with albums like In Black and White and Spun Gold, which had #1 hits like Till You're Gone and One of a Kind Pair of Fools. She also went into gospel music with He Set My Life to Music, which earned her her first Grammy. Then, on September 11, 1984, everything came crashing down. What started as a normal drive turned into a nightmare when the car she was in collided head-on with another vehicle after the other driver crossed the center line. The crash not only seriously injured Barbara, but also tragically killed the other driver. Suddenly, everything she had worked for, fame, glitz, and a successful career, felt distant and pointless. The loss of life, the pain, and the uncertainty that followed became a heavy burden for Barbara and her family. The physical toll was huge. Barbara broke her leg, got a concussion, and suffered other injuries that took months to heal. She had to take a break from her career, which is something she would never have thought she would do a year earlier. But it wasn't just the physical pain that was hard to get over. Knowing that someone had died because of the accident made her question the very nature of her fame, and even though they weren't seriously hurt, Barbara's kids were traumatized by the event, which added to their stress in an already difficult situation. But Barbara wasn't one to give up easily, and even though it took her more than a year to fully recover physically, she eventually returned to the music scene stronger than ever. But she wasn't the same person she was before the accident. It changed how she saw fame, life, and how important safety was. It was a turning point in her life. It made her a strong supporter of seatbelt use, especially after learning that her own family hadn't always been the safest. However, the emotional and legal battles didn't end there. The driver's family, a young man named Mark White, was soon at the center of a legal dispute after Barbara and her husband Ken Dudney decided to sue them for $10,000. As expected, the decision to file the lawsuit raised a lot of eyebrows. Fans were quick to criticize Barbara Mandrell and her husband Ken Dudney, saying it was in bad taste given the tragedy that had happened. It seemed like they were trying to make money off of it, but the real reason for the lawsuit was much more complicated. They weren't trying to make money off of a tragedy, they needed the money to get better. They had to take the step, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. While most people felt bad for Barbara because she had been through so much and wanted to get their money back from the insurance company, others wondered if suing the other driver's family was too much too soon. It turned into a debate about what's right in the face of tragedy, what's justified, and where the line between business and personal loss gets drawn. It wasn't just celebrity gossip. No longer about dealing with grief, responsibility, and the tricky world of public opinion. Even though she was criticized, Barbara didn't let it stop her. She took the flack emotionally and publicly, but she didn't stay down for long. By the end of the 1980s, she was back in the game, picking up where she left off and showing that she could handle anything. By 1987, Barbara Mandrell was still very much in the game, signing a new recording contract with EMI America and releasing her first album with them, Sure Feely. Feels Good didn't break any records, but it did have a big effect, going to number 24 on the Billboard country charts. Critics seemed to like it, but her other singles didn't do as well. Heights, Child Support. It did make it into the top 20, but the others didn't do as well, showing that the country scene was starting to change around her as younger artists with a more traditional country sound got all the attention. She had a few top 20 singles like My Train of Thought and Mirror, Mirror, but those were the last songs she really made a splash on the US charts. But Mandrell wasn't slowing down. In 1990, she put out 2 albums, Morning Sun and No Nonsense. No Nonsense even had a funny pantyhose that went with it. The album didn't do very well at the box office, but Mandrell's music seems to stick around, especially with her last album with Capitol. Even though it didn't do very well on the charts when it came out in 1991, Keys in the Mailbox got good reviews for its heartfelt mix of modern and soulful country music. During all the changes in the industry, Mandrell stayed true to her roots. She kept performing live and appearing on TV, especially on the Grand Ole Opry, showing that even though her chart success had slowed, she was still a powerhouse in the country music scene. In 1994, she released 2 albums with. This was the end of her acting career, but she had already shown that her skills went far beyond country music. She knew when to leave the stage with her head held high, whether she was singing or acting. That kind of self-awareness is as legendary as her career itself. But beyond the awards, variety shows, and #1 hits, it's clear that Barbara Mandrell lived the life of a legend. She reinvented herself, pushed the limits, and left the stage with her head held high. Maybe that's the real mark of a legend, knowing when to take a final bow. You do it because you want to, not because you have to.